Hi again and welcome to part 2. In part 1 my conclusion was that the generic claim fish feel pain is absolutely meaningless. Not surprisingly, Phil Halper and his team come to a different conclusion. Their conclusion here, straight from the horse's mouth. Phil Halper.
In the 21st century, we've discovered that fish have pain receptors, that they give up rewards to seek analgesics in painful situations, they show fear contagion, they have the right genetics for pain, and myths about their poor memory or their lack of individuality have been debunked. And finally, we've shown that the cortical regions that fish pain skeptics say are necessary for pain and that fish don't have, well, they're not necessary for pain. To me, this settles the debate. Fish really do feel pain. They do suffer.
That's quite a handful. Let's go through these points one by one. The first one is fish have pain receptors. Yes, Phil Halper says pain receptors. Well, if there's one thing fish do not have, it's pain receptors. Fish have nociceptors. Remember, nociceptors are those messenger neurons which pick up the information about an injury and send it to the brain, where it's processed to the big ouch, where it's processed to pain. Nociceptors are the messengers, not the message. I think their first point, fish have pain receptors, is a lovely, logical and typical piece of spin, because all along in their presentation they systematically conflate pain and nociception. Remember now the International Association for the Study of Pain. It is quite clear in saying that nociception does not equal pain. So, what's the substance of point 1? The answer is none. Fish do not have pain receptors, and that should take care of point 1. Let's now turn to the second point, which is fish give up rewards to seek analgesics in painful situations. I slightly rephrase that to fish give up rewards to seek painkillers in painful situations. Now, I find that most remarkable. Why create a situation of which you already know what it is? Painful. What's the point? It's pointless. It's begging the question. You assume that pain which you want to prove. Pain. So, like the pain receptors in point 1, this is no careless mistake. There is system in it and there is intention. The aim is to blur, to obfuscate, to fog, to conflate or to transpose or whatever in order to shift the meanings of pain and nociception. Omissions are part of that process or strategy, and the less precise their argument, the more convincing it comes across. Now, you might say that is terribly unfair because you don't even mention the experiment about the painful situations. But why should I? Because the story is there in the title, painful situations. Fish feel pain because they feel pain. Because. Now, again, I might have gotten it all wrong, completely wrong. Yes, that may well be the case. But this is also why I highly recommend to check out that video by Phil Halper, and especially the bit about this experiment regarding the painful situations. For my part, this point two about the painful situations has the same substance as part one, and that is basically none, which is why we turn to the third point now, which is fish show fear contagion. Fear contagion is a natural behavior by many animals, and it doesn't require pain to operate or to work. I'm not quite sure what this point does for the fish feel pain argument, and I leave it there. But please check out Phil Halper's video on this point to learn more about it. I now turn to their fourth point, which is fish have the genetics for pain. Now, that is an interesting angle. Let's have a look at it. To have the genetics for something or other means different things to different organisms. It all depends what the organism does with its genetics. Take pain thresholds. The pain threshold of people can differ quite dramatically, and you can actually increase your pain tolerance by practice. Similarity, I might look vaguely similar to Einstein. I may even have the same genetics as Einstein had, but that is absolutely it. That's it. But my point is that genetic similarity in no way warrants general conclusions about similar experiences or similar abilities. Let me give you another example. Bonobos and other big apes share 99% of our genetics. They're 99% identical to us. And we're transfixed on that 99%. But think of the 1% and the difference that 1% makes. Bonobos don't fly to the moon, they don't compose operas, they don't pollute the ocean, and they can't be blamed for climate change. And that's 1% difference. So we may know a lot about anatomic similarity, but genetic similarity seems to be a different kettle of fish. Now take nematodes. Nematodes are tiny, tiny microscopic size worms. They share 38% of their genetics with us, and they don't look the least bit human. Or baker's yeast, 20% of the same genetics. Does that make you a cannibal if you eat bread? In the context of this fish feel pain business, genetic similarity is used to suggest similarity of human experience to fish experience. And in that sense, genetic similarity is a red herring. Their point 5 is fish have good memory and individuality. I know this is not a fish, it's a cicada, but bear with me, please. So memory first. I have to point again to the generic angle. Phil Halper and his team talk of good memory in fish as if this would apply to all 30,000 species. As evidence, they offer one study about one species in one isolated region. The fact is, we know next to nothing about what these 30,000 odd species out there can remember and what they can't remember. Having said that, some animals, including probably a great many fish species, have fantastic memories. Think of the periodic cicada. They appear exactly and emphasize exactly every 7, 13, and 17 years. 7, 13, and 17 are prime numbers. So, not only have cicadas a fantastic memory, they can count and they have a sense for maths. So, my point here is that there is no necessary connection between memory and the ability to feel pain. There is no necessary connection between memory and pain. I now turn to individuality. Individuality is linked to memory in us human beings. What Phil Halper and his team seem to be suggesting is that fish have individuality like you have individuality and I have individuality. So what's this all about? The Oxford Dictionary defines individuality as the quality or character of a particular person. Person is the key. Person is the key to understanding what is at stake here. And this is where animal rights comes in again. The animal rights people would love to see fish as persons that can feel pain and suffer. And Phil Halper and his team are trying to establish exactly that. Fish are persons. Fish are persons that can feel pain and suffer. I don't think fish are persons like you and me. Fish are, after all, still fish. Unless, of course, you believe that fish are scaled down human beings, or better still, fish are human beings in disguise. If you believe that fish are human beings in disguise, then the supportive evidence for fish pain in terms of memory and individuality does make sense. If you don't believe that fish are human beings in disguise, that evidence, that supportive evidence for fish pain in terms of memory and individuality does not make any sense at all. There is no substance in it. I now turn to point 6, which is fish have the brain for pain. This beauty here is a zebrafish. In real life, it grows to about 2 to 3 centimeters. Its brain can deploy 100,000 neurons. In comparison, the human brain has 100 billion neurons at its disposal. Now, that gives you an idea of the proportions. We now go quickly back to the rainbow trout of part 1 and the linear brain. Here it is. The dot down here is the size of the rainbow trout brain. If it were really in proportion to the human brain, that's the long line up here, then that dot would be so small you wouldn't see it. Remember also the nociceptor density. Nociceptors, not pain receptors. 80% in normal humans, 24% in CIP patients. CIP patients are those who suffer from pain insensitivity, and 4% nociceptor density in rainbow trout. In this context, it is also important to mention that fish are cold-blooded. The intention here is not to suggest that the fish brain is in any way inferior to our big human brain. Quite the contrary. Take the salmon and its absolutely awesome navigational powers. But these powers don't mean that salmon experience anxiety, fear, and pain. They are far better off in their life cycle with innate behavior, nociception, and nocifensive reaction. If they would experience fear, anxiety, and pain, they would have been extinct long ago. They wouldn't have gotten anywhere at all in the first place. Have a look at this. If fear, anxiety, and pain would play into the salmon's life cycle, the bears would go hungry. Fear, anxiety, and pain are just not in the repertoire of salmon. And in this scene, there isn't much evidence of fear contagion either. So that's it. The brain was the last hurdle. Remember, we started out with these 6 concluding statements by Phil Halper. As I have shown one by one, the arguments for fish pain by Phil Halper and his team are seriously flawed. In fact, they do in no way warrant their generic conclusion, fish feel pain. Fish feel pain is a meaningless statement. It's time for a little rant now. Mice, fugu, and zebrafish share 70% of their genetics with us humans. Now, zebrafish can be kept easily, they breed easily, and they're easily disposed of. They are not as messy as mice. That makes zebrafish the cheapest lab animal there is. Now, just because they can't scream and they can't whimper, those scientists who believe in fish pain happily abuse them, mutilate them, torture them. They bring daily hell to zebrafish, so zebrafish wish they hadn't been born. Let's go back or have a look back at part 1 and Peter Singer. You know, the highest moral authority in the world. I mean, the Pope is an apprentice in comparison. So remember, Peter Singer said, if fish feel pain and can suffer, we should stop catching them and eating them. And remember also, the livelihood of 3 billion people depends on fish and fishing, and I guess, again, they're meant to happily comply to make Peter Singer's world a better place. But wouldn't the same apply to the science, to the poor zebrafish? If they can feel pain and suffer, we should absolutely immediately stop experimenting on them. Now, the scientists hide behind regulations, protocols, humane treatment, weighing up interests, and all that. That's a fig leaf. It doesn't alter the basic fact that these zebrafish are tortured and then killed and disposed of. Now, that is a moral scandal. That is an outrage, and I'm sure you agree that experimenting on zebrafish has to stop immediately. All else is blatant hypocrisy. I am now heading for the final furlong. Phil Halper and his team can't be misunderstood. Fish feel pain, fish suffer. I don't think so, and the reasons are their omissions. Their first omission is they do not define pain. All along, they talk of something of which we don't know what it is. We don't know what they mean by pain. But the subtext is fish pain equals human pain. Their second omission is they do not mention the 30,000 fish species out there. Their main body of evidence is based on 2 species, zebrafish and rainbow trout. Their generic claim, fish feel pain, is meaningless. Their third omission is they do not mention the difference in Nociceptor density between human beings, 80%, and rainbow trout, 4%. There are 2 more omissions. The first one is consciousness. Consciousness in fish. Now, consciousness touches on everything, individuality, memory, everything that is important in this issue. They do not mention consciousness, probably because it would add an additional layer of complexity to an already fairly intricate issue. Nevertheless, it is an omission not to mention consciousness and the cluster of problems that entails. The most important omission, the most significant omission, is that they do not mention any contradicting evidence. There is zero, absolutely zero mention of contradicting evidence. But there's heaps out there, heaps of contradicting evidence. They happily cruise along in their bubble, and that makes their case so convincing. However, if you consider the omissions I just mentioned, their case, or rather their bubble, bursts in no time at all. That's it for today. Well, almost. Here is the mandatory ad. If you want to dig deeper into this fish feel pain business, this book here is a good start. Fish Feel Pain, Scrutiny of a Dogma, by yours truly. That's definitely all for today. Thank you for bearing with me, and I hope to see you soon again. Cheers!